The Gaels, also known as Goidels, are an ethnolinguistic group indigenous to northwestern Europe. They are associated with the Gaelic languages, a branch of the Celtic languages comprising Irish, Manx and Scottish Gaelic. Other ethnonyms historically associated with the Gaels include the Irish and Scots, but the scope of those nationalities is today more complex. Gaelic language and culture originated in Ireland, extending to Dál Riata in southwest Scotland. In the Middle Ages, it became dominant throughout Scotland and the Isle of Man also. However, in most areas, the Gaels were gradually anglicised and the Gaelic languages supplanted by English. The modern descendants of the Gaels have spread throughout much of Great Britain and as far as the Americas and Oceania. Ethnonyms. Throughout the centuries, Gaels and Gaelic speakers have been known by a number of names. The most consistent of these have been Gael, Irish and Scot, which continue to be used today, although the latter two have developed more ambiguous meanings. Other terms, such as Milesian, are not as frequently used. Informally, archetypal forenames such as tadhg abdominal are sometimes used for Gaels. Gaels. The word Gaelic is first recorded in print in the English language in the 1770s, replacing the earlier word Gaelic, which is attested as far back as 1596. Gael, defined as a member of the Gaelic race, is first attested in print in 1810. The name ultimately derives from the Old Irish word Goidel, spelled officially today as Gaedheal, Gael and Gaedheal. In early modern Irish, the words Gaelic and Gael were spelled respectively J-Oidheal and J-Oidheal. The more antiquarian term Goidels came to be used by some due to Edward Lude's work on the relationship between Celtic languages. This term was further popularized in academia by John Rees, the first professor of Celtic at Oxford University, due to his work Celtic Britain. According to the scholar John T. Koch in his Celtic Culture, a historical encyclopedia, the word in the form of Goidel was borrowed from a primitive Welsh form that became an Old Welsh term, roughly meaning forest people, wild men, or later, warriors. It is recorded as a personal name in the Book of Land. This term shared a root with the Old Irish fiad, deer, and was partially cognate with fiacuteni, from the Proto-Indo-European *vid and jo. This latter word is the origin of Fianna and Fenian. Irish, a common name, passed down to the modern day, is Irish. This existed in the English language during the 13th century in the form of Iris, which derived from the stem of Old English Iris, inhabitant of Ireland, from Old Norse irar. The ultimate origin of this word is thought to be from the Old Irish ariu, which is from Old Celtic *vu, likely associated with the Proto-Indo-European term *pwer, meaning fertile. Ariu is mentioned as a goddess in the Leborga Bala Erin as a daughter of Hermes of the Tuatha de Danan. Along with her sisters Banba and Fodla, she is said to have made a deal with the Milesians to name the island after her. The ancient Greeks, in particular Ptolemy in his 2nd century Geographia, possibly based on earlier sources, located a group known as the Ivani in the southwest of Ireland. This group has been associated with the Erin of Irish tradition by T.F. O'Rahy and others. The Erin, claiming descent from a Milesian eponymous ancestor named Ailill Aran, were the hegemonic power in Ireland prior to the rise of the descendants of Conn of the Hundred Battles and Magnuadit. The Erin included peoples such as the Corcu Loigd and Dál Riata. Ancient Roman writers, such as Caesar, Pliny and Tacitus, derived from Hibernia the name Hibernia. Thus the name Hibernian also comes from this root. Scots. The Romans began to use the term Scotti to describe the Gaels in the Latin language from the 4th century onwards. In the context of the times, the Gaels were raiding the west coast of Britain for hostages, and they took part in the Great Conspiracy. It is thus conjectured that the term means raider, pirate. Although the Dál Riata settled in Argyll in the 6th century, the term Scots did not just apply to them, but to Gaels in general. Examples can be taken from Johannes Scotus Erasugina and other figures from Hiberno-Latin culture and the Schottenkloster founded by Irish Gaels in Germanic lands. It is also worth noting that eponymous characters were created in medieval Irish pseudo-histories. Scotta, described as an Egyptian princess, and her husband Goidels. The Gaels of northern Britain referred to themselves as Albinaig in their own tongue and the realm as a kingdom of Alba. Germanic groups tended to refer to the Gael as Scotters, and so when Anglo-Saxon influence grew at court with Duncan II, the Latin Rex Scotorum began to be used and the realm was known as Scotland. This process and cultural shift was put into full effect under David I, who let the Normans come to power and furthered the Lowland-Highland divide. Lowland Germanics in Scotland spoke a language called English, which they started to call Scottish in the 16th century, while they in turn began to refer to Scottish Gaelic as theirs. Population. Kinship groups in traditional Gaelic society. A patrilineal kinship group is referred to as a clan. This signifies a tribal grouping descended from a common ancestor, much larger than a personal family, which may also consist of various kindreds and septs. Using the Munster-based Eoghanachta as an example, members of this clan claim patrilineal descent from Eogan Mór. It is further divided into major kindreds, such as the Eoghanach Shazel, Glendamnic, Ain, Locha Elia Cutayen and Wraithline. These kindreds themselves contain septs that have passed down as Irish Gaelic surnames. For example, the Eoghanach Shazel includes O'Callaghan, McCarthy, O'Sullivan and others. The Irish Gaels can be grouped into the following major historical clans: Connacht, Dalgcais, Eoghanachta, Erin, Lagan and Ulaid. In the Highlands, the various Gaelic-originated clans tended to claim descent from one of the Irish groups, particularly those from Ulster. The Dál Riata claimed descent from Silconeri, for instance. Some arrivals in the High Middle Ages claimed to be of the Uine acute Dil, as part of the self-justification, taking over power from the Norse Gael MacLeod in the Hebrides. The MacDonalds claimed to be from Clan Collar. For the Irish Gaels, the old clan system did not survive the incorporation of the Gaelic realms into the Kingdom of Ireland and the subsequent flight of the Earls. As a result of the Gaelic revival, there has been renewed interest in Irish genealogy. The Irish government recognised Gaelic chiefs of the name since the 1940s. The Fine Éireann was founded in 1989 to gather together clan associations. Individual clan associations operate throughout the world and produce journals for the septs. The Highland clans held out until the 18th century Jacobite risings. During the Victorian era, symbolic tartans, crests and badges were retroactively applied to clans. Clan associations built up over time and Náfina Hungatilach was founded in 2013. Human genetics at the turn of the 21st century. The principles of human genetics and genetic genealogy were applied to the study of populations of Gaelic origin. It was found that the overwhelming majority belonged to haplogroup R1b in the Y chromosome DNA. The two other peoples who recorded higher than 85% for R1b in a 2009 study published in the scientific journal PLOS Biology were the Welsh and the Basques. The development of in-depth studies of DNA sequences known as SDRs and SNPs have allowed geneticists to associate subclades with specific Gaelic kindred groupings, vindicating significant elements of Gaelic genealogy, as found in works such as the Liban Rn genealogy. Examples can be taken from the Uene acute Dil, who are associated with RM222, and the Dál GCAIs, who are associated with RL226. With regards to Gaelic genetic genealogy studies, these developments in subclades have aided people in finding their original clan group in the case of a non-paternity event, with family tree DNA having the largest such database at present. Demographics in countries where Gaels live. Census records documenting population statistics have taken place. The following includes the number of speakers of a Gaelic language. The question of ethnic identity is slightly more complex, but included below are those who identify with Irish or Scottish ethnicity. It should be taken into account that not all will have Gaelic descent, especially in the case of Scotland, due to the nature of the lowlands. It also depends on the self-reported response of the individual, and so is a rough guide rather than an exact science. The two comparatively major Gaelic nations in the modern era are Ireland and Scotland. Communities where the languages are still spoken natively are restricted largely to the west coast of each country, and especially the Hebrides in Scotland. However, a large proportion of the Gaelic-speaking population now lives in the cities of Glasgow and Edinburgh in Scotland, and Donegal, Galway, Cork and Dublin in Ireland. There are about 2,000 Scottish Gaelic speakers in Canada, although many are elderly and concentrated in Nova Scotia and Cape Breton Island. According to the 2000 U.S. Census, there are over 25,000 Irish speakers in the United States, with the majority found in urban areas with large Irish American communities such as Boston, New York City and Chicago. Diaspora historic. As the Roman Empire began to collapse, the Gaels, along with the Anglo-Saxons, were one of the peoples able to take advantage in Great Britain from the 4th century onwards. The Proto-Eogranactes Uilithane and the Deacutisi Muman of Dyfed both established colonies in today's Wales. Further to the north, the Arians Dál Riata colonized Argyll, and there was a significant Gaelic influence in Northumbria, and the MacAngus clan arose to the Pictish kingship by the 8th century. Gaelic Christian missionaries were also active across the Frankish Empire. With the coming of the Viking Age and the slave markets, Gaels were also dispersed in this way across the realms under Viking control. As a legacy, in genetic studies, Icelanders exhibit high levels of Gaelic-derived mDNA. Modern. Since the fall of Gaelic polities, the Gaels have made the way across parts of the world, mainly under the auspices of the British Empire, but to a lesser extent under the Spanish Empire. Core destinations for exiles have been North America and Oceania. As well as this, there has been a mass internal migration within the British Isles from the 19th century, with Gaelic Irish peasantry and Highlanders migrating to the English-speaking industrial cities of London, Dublin, Glasgow, Liverpool, Manchester, Birmingham, Cardiff, Leeds, Edinburgh and others. Many underwent a linguistic Anglicization, and some eventually merged with Anglo populations. History. Origins in their own national epic contained within medieval works such as the Liborga Bala Éireann. The Gaels trace the origin of the people to an eponymous ancestor named Goidels. He is described as a Scythian prince, who is credited with creating the Gaelic languages. Goidels' mother is called Scotta, described as an Egyptian princess. The Gaels are depicted as wandering from place to place for hundreds of years. They spend time in Egypt, Crete, Scythia, the Caspian Sea and Getulia, before arriving in Iberia. Galicia. It is here that their king, Breogan, is said to have founded Galicia. The Gaels are then said to have sailed to Ireland via Galicia in the form of the Milesians, sons of Mil-Espen. The Gaels fight a battle of sorcery with the Tuatha-De-Danan, the gods, who inhabited Ireland at the time. Eriu, a goddess of the land, promises the Gaels that Ireland shall be theirs so long as they give tribute to her. They agree, and the bard Emergen recites an incantation known as the Song of Emergen. The two groups agree to divide Ireland between them. The Gaels take the world above, while the Tuatha-De take the world below. Advances in DNA studies have revealed some clues about the origin of the Gaels. Haplogroup R originated 26,800 years ago in Central Asia during the last Ice Age. The R1b branch had broken off by the Paleolithic and its derivative RM269 was found at the Pontic-Caspian steppe by the Chalcolithic, first entering Europe proper 7,000 years ago. The Indo-Europeans developed bronze weapons and domesticated the horse, giving them the upper hand in their conquest of the Old Europe and the proliferation of their lineages. After the RL51 subclade founded the Arnetas culture, a derivative RL21 moved west, arriving in Britain c. 2100 BCE in Ireland c. 2000 BCE, becoming the Gaelic people. Ancient according to the annals of the Four Masters, the early branches of the Milesian Gaels were the Heremonians, the Heberians and the Arians, descended from the three brothers Erimon, Eberfin and Iar respectively. Another group were the Ithians, descended from Ith who were located in South Leinster but they later became extinct. The Four Masters date the start of Milesian rule from 1700 BCE. Initially, the Heremonians dominated the High Kingship of Ireland from the stronghold of Maid. The Heberians were given Munster and the Arians were given Ulster. At this early point of the Milesian era, the non-Gaelic Fir Domnan held Leinster and the Fir Olneachmacht held what was later known as Connacht. During the Iron Age there was heightened activity at a number of important royal ceremonial sites, including Tara, Dun Éilinn, Rathcrowan and Domain Macha. Each was associated with a Gaelic tribe. The most important was Tara, where the High King was inaugurated on the Lia Fail, which stands to this day. According to the annals, this era also saw, during the 7th century BCE, a branch of the Heremonians known as the Lagan, descending from Ugain Mor's son Loagarelorc, displacing the Fir Bolg remnants in Leinster. This was also a critical period for the Ulaid as the kinsman Rudrage Mór took over the High Kingship in the 3rd century BCE. His offspring would be the subject of the Ulster cycle of heroic tradition, including the epic Tain Bóc Éalm. This includes the struggle between Conor mac Nessa and Fergus mac Roich. After regaining power, the Heremonians, in the form of Fiochu Finlac, were overthrown in a 1st century AD provincial coup. His son, Tuathal Techt Mar, was exiled to Roman Britain before returning to claim Tara. Based on the accounts of Tacitus, some modern historians associate him with an Irish prince said to have been entertained by Agricola, governor of Britain, and speculated Roman sponsorship. His grandson, Consechethach, is the ancestor of the Conigta who would dominate the Irish Middle Ages. They gained control of what would now be named Connacht. Their close relatives the Erin and the Ulaid would later lose out to them in Ulster, as the descendants of the three collars in Agiada and Niall Gaelic and Ilch extended the hegemony. Classic The Gaels emerged into the clear historical record during the Classical era, with often inscriptions and quite detailed references in Greco-Roman ethnography. The religion of Christianity reached Ireland during the 5th century, most famously through a Romano-British slave patrick, but also through Gaels such as Declan, Finian and the 12 Apostles of Ireland. The abbot and the monk eventually took over certain cultural roles of the Oyster as the oral culture of the Gaels was transmitted to script by the arrival of literacy. Thus Christianity in Ireland during this early time retained elements of Gaelic culture. By the 6th century, the division of Ireland into two spheres of influence, Leith Gwyn and Leith Moga, was largely a reality. In the south, the influence of the Eoganacta based at Cashel grew further, to the detriment of Erin clans such as the Corcu Loigd and Clan Conla. Through the vassals, the Gaels.Other Munster was extended north of the River Shannon, laying the foundations for Thomond. Aside from the gains in Ulster, the Gaels southern branch had also pushed down into Mide and Brega. This era was also marked by a Gaelic presence in Great Britain, in what is today Wales. The Gaels founded Dyfed and the Liathane founded Braccain Yog. To the north, the Dál Riata are held to have established a territory in Argyll and the Hebrides. The Romans called these Gaels Scotti. Some, particularly champions of Christianity, hold the 6th to the 9th centuries to be a golden age for the Gaels. This is due to the influence which the Gaels had across Western Europe as part of the Christian missionary activities. Similar to the Desert Fathers, Gaelic monastics were known for their asceticism. Some of the most celebrated figures of this time were Columba, Aidan, Columbanus and others. Learned in Greek and Latin during an age of cultural collapse, the Gaelic scholars were able to gain a presence at the court of the Carolingian Frankish Empire. Perhaps the best-known example is Johannes Scotus, Regina. Aside from their activities abroad, insular art flourished domestically, with artifacts such as the Book of Kells and Tara brooch surviving. Clonmacnoise, Glendalough, Clonard, Darrow and Inniscath are some of the more prominent island-based monasteries founded during this time. Medieval. The late 8th century heralded external involvement in Gaelic affairs as the Norsemen from Scandinavia, known as the Vikings, began to raid and pillage settlements looking for booty. The earliest recorded cases of this were Rathlin and Iona in 795. These hit-and-run attacks would continue for some time until they began to settle. In the 840s at Dublin, Limerick, Waterford and elsewhere, the Norsemen also took the Hebrides and the Isle of Man from the Dál Riata clans and established the Kingdom of the Isles. Around the same time, the MacAlpin clan were founding the Kingdom of Alba. After the Gaels had gradually submerged Pictland, Kenneth MacAlpin is most associated with this process. After a spell where the Norsemen were driven from Dublin by Leinsterman Sirbor mac Muirchain, they returned in the reign of Niall Glundub, initiating a second Viking period. The Dublin Norse, some of them, such as Uimer King Ragnald Uimer, now partly Gaelicized as the Norse Gaels, were a serious regional power, with territories across Northumbria and York. At the same time, the Uineacutil branches were involved in an internal power struggle to see if the northern or southern branch would be the hegemonic Gaelic force. Don raided Munster and took Selachun Castle of the Eoganacta hostage. The destabilization inadvertently led to the rise of the Dalgais and Brian Boruma. Through military might, Brian went about constructing a Gaelic imperium under his high kingship, even gaining the submission of Mael Secnal Mac Domnail. They were involved in a series of battles against the Vikings, Tara, Glenmama and Clontarf, the latter of which saw Brian's death in 1014. Glorified in the Cogged Gaedel Galab, the Irish Church became closer to continental models with the Synod of Rath-Bresale and the arrival of the Cistercians. As well as this, there was more economic trade and interlocking with North Normanize Britain and France. Between themselves, the O'Brien and the O'Conor attempted to erect a national monarchy. The remainder of the Middle Ages would be defined by the conflict between Gael and Norman. The Normans arrived in Leinster initially due to Diarmait Mac Murchada's alliance with the Normans of Wales. Following this, the King of England, with the backing of the papacy, established the Lordship of Ireland in 1171 to stifle this rival force. The origins of a literary anti-Gaelic sentiment was born in this time, forwarded by the likes of Gerald of Wales, as part of a propaganda campaign to justify taking Gaelic lands. Many Irish kingdoms remained outside of Norman control, and Gallo-Glass warriors were brought in from the Highlands to fight for various kings. Imperial during the 15th century, with the advent of the early modern age, the Gaels were affected by the policies of the Tudors and the Stuarts, who sought to anglicize the population and bring both Ireland and the Highlands under a stronger monarchical control. As part of what would become the British Empire, the Kingdom of Ireland, which had its power in the Pale of Dublin, was implemented, and the high aristocracy was encouraged to apply for a surrender and regrant. This brought to end the independence of the last few Gaelic Irish kingdoms. The policies of the Lowland Scots Parliament were similar, with the Statutes of Iona taking place in 1609 before the union of the crowns. Since that time, Gaelic language rose and, in the past 3 centuries, greatly diminished in most of Ireland and Scotland. The 19th century was the turning point as the Great Hunger in Ireland and across the Irish Sea, the Highland clearances, had the effect of causing mass emigration. The language was rolled back to the Gaelic strongholds of the northwest of Scotland, the west of Ireland, and Cape Breton Island in Nova Scotia. The Gaelic revival also occurred in the 19th century, with organizations such as Conrad na Gaels and Cumann Gaelach attempting to restore the prestige of Gaelic culture and to restore the hegemony of the language. Many of the participants in the Irish Revolution of 1912 to 1923 were inspired by these ideals, and so when a sovereign state was formed, the ideal of Gaelic culture was now more popular. Despite policies such as mandatory Irish language education, the living first language communities have continued to become smaller. However, the Isle of Man also came under massive Gaelic influence in its history. The last native speaker of Manx died in the 1970s, though use of the Manx language never fully ceased. There is now a resurgent language movement, and Manx is once again taught in all schools as a second language and in some as a first language.